On today's show, new iPhone vulnerabilities, so update your stuff, titanium iPhones, new iPad mini news, Intel Xeons for Mac Pros, Apple's earnings calls today, and a whole bunch of other stuff, plus the first guests confirmed for iCaversary. Stay tuned. I'm iCaveDave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you, and if you want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Straight into the news, so update your stuff. There is a new vulnerability that has been found and being actively exploited. So Apple has released a patch. Now, this might sound like a scary thing, but actually it's a really good thing, because you have to remember that Apple is one of those companies that where they see a vulnerability, they find out about it, they have patched it. That's kind of the best case scenario. If something happens, with any software, there will be some form of vulnerability. The important thing is knowing that it is going to be fixed in a timely fashion. And with Android, now I'm not 100% sure how security upgrades work, but I know that for full upgrades, at least in the past, it has been a case of waiting for your carrier to okay it, rather than just being as soon as it appears, then you get it. So we're still winning. But do go and update your stuff. This is for iOS, iPadOS, Mac, probably some other stuff. So just update everything. It's always the best policy. With that out of the way, titanium iPhones in 2022. This is the latest news that's just come out now. Titanium, we spoke about way back when we were talking about the Macs coming out in titanium. We've been scouring the Apple patents, stuff that gets put out by mainly Patently Apple. They're the main source for this kind of stuff, but it looks like Apple is at least trialling titanium as a phone material. Now, the reason that titanium would work for iPhones, it is 45% lighter than the equivalent part in stainless steel, by which I mean a part that's the same strength and the same physical size. It's 45% lighter. That's a nice win. Also, if you wanted a part that is twice as strong as the aluminium part, it would only weigh 60% more. So it's a really interesting material to be used. It does kind of stain up with oil from your fingers a little bit easier, but Apple, as part of those patents that we were talking about, has included an awful lot of stuff around how to finish the titanium, whether it's gloss finishes that are applied to the outside, whether it's oxide layers, a whole bunch of stuff that they've kind of patented new techniques for, including dye impregnation, which has always been an issue with titanium because it is so hard. Now, the fact that it's really hard means it's also really hard to scratch, so that's definitely a bonus. It's also very stiff, which means it doesn't twist particularly easily, so you could actually have smaller, lighter parts that are just as strong, which is pretty useful. And also, the less twist you get in a part, especially if you drop it, the less chance you're going to have of breaking the glass that's on the front or the back of that device. So titanium for iPhones, yes, this gets a thumbs up from me. We're looking at like iPhone 14 generation here, so don't get too excited for this year, but we could be getting it in 2022. Next up, Apple has ordered 100 million A15 chips from TSMC. Now, we heard earlier reports that they were planning on 90 million iPhones this year, which still could make sense, even with 100 million of the A15 chips. 10 million could be being allocated to iPad minis that we'll be talking about in a minute, as well as potentially iPad Air, which would also be great. And I think like 5 million each for those would make kind of sense in my head. That's about the sort of numbers that I'd be expecting compared to 90 million iPhones, because they certainly ain't selling as many of those as they are of phones. But there's also been news that came out today that Qualcomm might be getting some of their chips in future made by Intel, and I feel like part of this is because of TSMC being so busy with Apple orders. Maybe Apple are actually just squeezing the supply for some of the other suppliers that would be using TSMC otherwise. So yeah, Intel might be making Qualcomm chips, so get excited for really warm Android phones. But yes, we mentioned the iPad mini, and we have got a little bit of extra news on that too. The iPad mini that's expected to come later this year with the A15 chip inside. It looks like, this is according to one of the display analysts, 8.3 inches is the display size that we're expecting, up from 7.9 inches, and apparently the footprint of the device is going to be very similar to what we have right now. So this is purely going to come from the reduction in the bezel size, top and bottom end. I can only assume that the overall footprint will change shape slightly, because I don't feel like the aspect ratio is going to fit, because the side bezels are very, very thin on the minis already. The ends are quite thick, but you're kind of keeping the aspect ratio of the screen, so I think the device footprint is going to change shape, but not necessarily overall size. But this iPad mini we are expecting to come with Touch ID in the power button as well. We're expecting it to come with just an LCD screen for now, potentially with a mini LED display a couple of years down the line. And next, the 2022 Mac Pro is expected to use Intel's IceLake Xeon W-3300 inside. So moving on. No, I honestly could not care any less about this Mac Pro news. Intel, I'm just over Intel. I'm over it, guys. Intel, you've let us down. Your chips are too hot. They draw too much power. At least this Mac Pro is probably not going to be battery operated, so I guess the power draw is not so much of an issue as long as you haven't got like brownouts in your area. But on the plus side, it'll keep your feet nice and warm. I have to say though, I'm still hoping that Apple will introduce an Apple Silicon version of the Mac Pro at the same time, and that the Intel one will kind of be like a last gasp in order to kind of throw a bone to people that must still use Intel because they're running Windows in Boot Camp as well, or things like that. That's the only reason I can understand in my head that they would keep making Intel ones. It's clear at this point that Apple Silicon is very much the future. Hit me up in the comments and let me know if you would still be willing to buy an Intel Mac of any sort at this point, and if so, why? And then last for the news section, Apple's earnings call is later today. We might well go live afterwards. We've done a live stream after a lot of the earnings calls in the past. In fact, we've live streamed during some of them in the past, but it's quite difficult for me to kind of chat and watch what's going on. So I think we'll probably save it for afterwards. That makes a little bit more sense. But talking of live streams, we have one coming up on the 15th of August. That is going to be our iCaversary. That's the live stream that we have been planning to do for the first anniversary of this show. And we have a few guests that are confirmed for it. First of all, we are going to have Apple Tomorrow on, our render boy. He's going to be on talking about how he creates his renders. We're also going to have my arch nemesis Tech Hyped on, because we are still racing to 10k subs. This is taking a bit longer than I hoped, but news drought not helping either of us here. Then we've also got Maguire Wood. Jiroku has agreed to come on the show. He is a leaker. He is over at Apple Philosophy. I don't know how you say it, but that's where he is. And we've also got, there's a guy called Luke Miani is coming on the show. He has agreed to do it. He agreed on Twitter. We've been chatting in the DMs now. So this show is going to get good. We are looking for loads more guests, though. I want to make this kind of a festival of Apple YouTubers. So we have some great names. I want more great names. It's not going to take away from what these guys are doing. I want basically people to have like 15 minutes on the show because I want to keep it moving. 6 hours is going to be a long show, so I want this to be quite active. So hit up your favourite YouTubers who talk about Apple stuff, and let's get them on the iCaversary. Moving on, it's time for iCave Answers, so let's get into those. Also, if you want to get a question answered on the show, use hashtag iCave Answers down in the comments section. Let's get into it. First of all, with Travis Smith, iCave Answers, should Apple come out with a home internet service? That is a great question. There has been talk in the past of Apple potentially doing a home internet service. There's also been talk of Apple doing their own kind of mobile operator where they piggyback on someone's network. So they become your carrier as well as your phone provider. That would be pretty cool if they were to do some sort of special... I mean, they could, I guess, tie it in with the iPhone renewal program, whatever it's called, where you get the new one every year. That would be pretty awesome. But for home internet, I think if they were going to do it, I think they should do something along the lines of Starlink, have their own satellite network up there, or they partner with someone like OneWeb or something along those lines, and basically allow it to be kind of internet for all. I think that would be really awesome. Give a new meaning to iCloud+. Evan Rodgers asks, iCave Answers, with the recent reports of a new consumer A13 powered display, how does the 32-inch Pro Display XDR fit into the future Apple roadmap, or does it? A 2022 32-inch iMac Pro with mini LED displays and M1X or dual M1X would likely start at or below the 5K price of the display. So here's the thing, I don't think it would factor into it at all. I think that the Pro Display XDR was Apple's kind of development platform on how to create these kind of displays, and I think it might have come to the end of its life quite quickly. I think that if Apple is to put them into an iMac, I think it could see it could either go end of life, or it could get a massive price cut and potentially an upgrade to get more dimming zones, because at the moment it has way less dimming zones than an iPad Pro. So I don't think it even counts as mini LED at this point. It's just LED because they're huge, but it does have the dimming zones. So I could see that being the chassis that they put the new display into. If we look back in the past, I think the Cinema Display HD, when that first came out, I think it was something like $3,000 or $4,000. But so Apple does start high priced and then kind of brings that technology down to lower priced units. So I think it could be a case of they use this as a development platform so that they could get used to the manufacturing techniques that are needed, and now they're kind of moving on to the next phase, which is putting it into an iMac and then putting it into a more affordable display. But maybe Apple will go up to an 8K display for the pros. Little Mountain Life asks, iCave answers, since it sounds like the MacBook Pro delays have been due to the display issues, do you think that the M1X Mac Minis have already been assembled and are they ready to ship now? And that's a really good point. We don't know, because Mac Mini is going to be way lower in terms of volumes than the MacBook Pros, I would guess. So it might be that they just don't need to yet. I think the M1X chips have been ready for quite some time. Whether they've actually gone ahead and assembled much yet, I don't know. I would hope that they've started production on the MacBook Pros at this point, but they might not have. But also remember that these are the higher end MacBook Pros. They are not going to sell as much as either the low-end MacBook Pro with M1 or the MacBook Air. That is going to be by far the biggest seller. Apple doesn't actually need to make enormous numbers of these laptops. They'll make quite a lot, but they don't need to make anywhere near as much as they have of the M1 Macs. Even though we're all the ones that are talking about these, we've been talking about M1X since basically the M1s came out. But that doesn't mean that the general public is clamoring for them. M1 is absolutely powerful enough for the vast majority of people, and most people want to get a entry point Mac because that's all they need. So I'm not 100% sure how soon they will have started this production, but I'd hope that it's kind of now. Navaron says, iCave answers, I love the idea of Final Cut Pro 11. Any chance they may also do an update of Logic? Because there's also some stuff in there that could really use a redesign. Now, I do think we have got an update coming to Logic as well, and this is backed up by a couple of things. So first of all, Zane Lowe, Apple's head of music, I think, at Beats One, which is now Apple Music One, said in June, Apple is building immersive music authoring tools directly into Logic Pro later this year, so any musician will be able to create and mix their own songs in spatial audio for Apple Music. That's whether they're in the studio, at home, or wherever. I feel like a part of that is they're probably waiting for the M1Xs to come out so that they can properly showcase it, but also I feel like they are going to do a bit of an update of the Pro apps in September/October, probably at whatever the Mac event is going to be, and that's when they're also going to reveal that they're bringing these things to the iPad as well, because if you've got AirPods Pro on, you should be able to master in spatial audio just as well as you could if you're in a studio with a Mac. Michael Wright asks, iCave answers, I listened to your description of the rumoured smart display and I immediately thought, could this also be targeted to work with HomeKit as a hub? A damn good one at that. That's my crackpot theory anyway. So I think if Apple wanted it to be a HomeKit hub, they absolutely could. I do think the Apple TV box and the HomePod Mini makes more sense as a hub because they are more kind of HomeKitty devices. I think this display is more going to be something that you pair up with a Mac and it will sit there, and the processor inside the A13 that's inside it will basically be running all of the stuff for the display itself, the camera on the display, possibly spatial audio from the speakers on the display, because they're probably going to put the same speakers in this as they put in the iMacs, which are pretty good and support spatial audio, but also image signal processing from the cameras, noise cancellation from the microphones, blurred backgrounds for FaceTime, all that sort of stuff. I think that's probably what it's focused on. It could well be a HomeKit hub, but I feel like any Apple device could kind of be a HomeKit hub. You can do it with an iPad, you can do it with, you should be able to do it with a Mac. Don't think you can, but I think you should be able to. And at that point, you don't kind of need the display to be a hub, because your Mac would be anyway. And Ryan Bellinger asks, iCave Answers, do you think that Apple Arcade will have new games for the M1X Macs this fall? And this is kind of where I have a bit of a controversial opinion on Apple Arcade. I really don't think that Apple Arcade is going to be the place that these higher end games come. I don't even think that they're going to do an Apple Arcade Plus that has the stuff that's like your console quality or your PC quality gaming. I think Apple Arcade is going to stay as being what it kind of sounds like. An arcade is a place where you go and you play kind of casual games. I think anyone that wants to play the kind of PC level games, the AAA games, I think that's going to be separate stuff. You just buy your games as you buy your games. And I think it's a bit of a shame, because I think Apple could have a real opportunity with Apple Arcade to make it this kind of massive gaming platform. But at the same time, I think the thing that a lot of people do forget when they're thinking about Apple Arcade is that Apple Arcade needs to be games that will run on the oldest iPhone that runs the latest version of iOS. It needs to run on the oldest iPad that runs the latest version of iOS, which right now is the iPad Air 2 from 2016. It needs to be able to run on all the Apple TVs back to about 2015, I think it is, and pretty much any Mac that runs Big Sur/Monterey. That is not going to be 100% conducive to AAA games all the way through. Now, obviously, you can turn down the settings just like you can on anything else. But right now, if you try and play Call of Duty Mobile on an iPad Air 2, will it run? Yes. Will it run well? No, it does not. I have tried it before, even on the lowest settings. It does drop a few frames. It's not particularly smooth. You have to have like jaggedy edges to everything. You turn off the shadows. You turn off pretty much everything. And it looks a bit like you're playing like Wolfenstein 3D from back in 1997. So could they put Apple Arcade Plus type games for the M1X Macs in there? Of course they could if they wanted to. I don't think they will, though. I'm as sad about that as everyone else. So I hope you've enjoyed this show. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, hassle your favourite YouTubers so that they come on the iCaversary show that we're doing on August 15, and make sure you mark it in your calendars. There it is. You can click it right now because we're done with this video. You can go and click that and set your reminder. See you on the next one. Thank you.